Welcome to Community Forum. My name is Susan Shaner, and I'm your host this evening. And I have the great pleasure of having my guest, the Mayor of the City of Danbury, Mayor Mark Boughton, here with me today. And given that so welcome, Mayor.
Well, thanks
Mr.
for
Mayor.
having me. Glad to be here.
Given that we're coming up on the upcoming elections, and it's that time of year, we thought it would be helpful to have you give us an update on some key initiatives and happenings in the city. So I thought maybe we'd start off with open space. Can you talk to us about what's happening there and
Sure.
how things are being addressed?
Yeah, I mean, just take a step back for a second, Susan. One of the great things about Danbury is that we really are the shining star in terms of economics, not just in Connecticut, but in New England. We've been able to track strong job growth. Our median income jumped 28% last year, meaning that people are making more money in Danbury. And our poverty level dropped 8% from 11% to 3% of the percentage of those people living under poverty. So the good news is we've got strong economic growth. We have a lot of great things happening in the city in terms of that. But the challenge for us will be how to manage that growth and how best to recognize the value of things like our open space. And so I've challenged our administration to preserve 1,200 acres by the year 2012, and we're doing that through a variety of different mechanisms, whether it be the State Open Space Grant Program or whether it be through our own acquisitions or a combination of both. I mean, we've already got some great projects that we're working on and in negotiations for in terms of open space preservation. I will tell you that Taylor Family Farm is one of the last working farm in the city, and we're working on a plan to preserve that in perpetuity forever as open space and passive recreational uses. We're also looking at land on the west side of the city. The Terry Haught piece continues to be part of discussion between myself and the First Selectman of Bethel. So those are things that we're really focusing in on because they're not making any more land. And so the more land that we can preserve for our children and their grandchildren to share with them the beauty of this wonderful natural asset and resources that we have here in Danbury, I think is a beneficial thing. So we're really excited about that, and we're excited about what that'll mean for many generations to come in the future.
So it sounds like it's trying to strike the balance between ensuring that we're preserving open space, but also having the economic development at the same time that's necessary. So it's a tricky balance.
It is, and I think one of the things you have to recognize is that building technologies have changed dramatically over the last 15 or 20 years. In fact, my father was mayor in the late 70s, and when he was mayor, they did a study, and they said, there's only 18% of the land left in Danbury is buildable. Well, that was 30 years ago, and we're still seeing more building because technology has been able to allow more building, and understanding that we lose those open space, those vistas, the horizons, our ridge lines, things that we like to see. So by targeting that and saying, hey, we have a roaring economy here, that's the good news. The challenge again for us will be to preserve some of that land into direct development where the infrastructure will support it and where we want development to happen, and to preserve and protect our neighborhoods and particularly the way the city looks. I mean, that'll be critical. And I think, and I know that we're in a position to do that. In October, I hope to go to the council with an open space bond initiative that'll we'll cite some direct properties we wish to purchase, with negotiations that have been ongoing. In addition to that, we'll also be creating a pool of money for us to be able to go out and purchase land. Because oftentimes I can't act as fast as I want to because I have to go to the voters to get the authority to borrow. So what I'd like to do is to be a little more nimble and agile in the market when a piece of property comes open, and those developers will approach us and say, hey, do you want to preserve this land? And that may be an option for us if the numbers are right. Obviously, any purchase would still have to go to the council for final approval, but the point is that we save a step here, and so we're looking to do that and get that authority from the voters in February would be when we'd actually have a vote on allowing us to do that. So all good things, all exciting things. The ice trail continues to boom, and we're in the process of putting those pieces together, and you can literally walk from Bethel all the way over almost into New York State through Ridgefield, all in open space. And obviously, Terry Weil is another piece that we continue to expand on and to add property to, and we're excited about the potential for all those things and what that means for our city.
Yeah, that's a beautiful piece of property.
It is.
One of the things you were citing was ensuring that the right infrastructure is in place, and obviously with that comes, looking at the roadways, the traffic. Can you speak to how you see that sort of being managed and navigated through?
Yeah, that's part of the challenge of our growing community is how do you manage traffic? How do you manage the infrastructure to support it? We have, in my administration, created a transportation plan. It's the first time in the history of the city we've had a standalone transportation plan that has specific recommendations for specific intersections. Those projects are ongoing. Some of them are smaller. For example, we've installed cameras. We call that smart technology, smart traffic management systems throughout the city on top of various lights. We've also begun strategically placing lights. One is at the corner of Columbus Avenue, or Christopher Columbus Boulevard, or at Columbus Avenue and Kenosha Avenue. And those kinds of things are readily visible, and we're putting out other lights as well. And then there's bigger projects that we partner with both state and federal authorities to do. One of them will be South Street. We call it the Route 53 project, which will allow and raise the level of service and safety there. Mill Plain Road will be expanded shortly. Kenosha is another area. Boulevard and Bacchus Avenue, another area that will be expanded as well. So again, you have to strike that balance between understanding what the expanded roadway will mean in terms of growth, but also getting people from point A to point B. So all those things are going, and we slowly are implementing that traffic improvement plan. But it takes time, and it took a long time to get here, and it takes a long time to implement those changes. But if you look around, you see them happening.
What are the smart cameras? What do those do?
Well, what they do is two things. One, they allow us our traffic engineer to monitor specific intersections, so we know if traffic is backed up and if we need to leave the light on longer or better coordinate the light at that time. The second thing it does, and we're just at the process of getting ready to roll this out. We're not quite ready yet, but we'll be ready in the next couple of weeks. It will allow commuters to go online and to look at key intersections throughout the city and say, well, I'm not going home that way because traffic's backed up, and I'm not going to go home this way. We're working on an agreement with the News Times that will allow us to connect onto their website as well. In addition to the city website, you'll be able to go on News Times Live and look at your intersection and see how you're doing.
So you're drinking your morning coffee, you can say, hey, wait a minute.
Yep. Or at work, and you say, at 4 o'clock, you say, geez, how am I going to get home? Oh, don't want to go through there. We see some funny things in terms of traffic. When I-84 is backed up, if there's an accident, if there's work going on, people will get off the road, and they literally will bisect the city trying to get farther up 84 to get back on.
I know I've done that.
Right. and if you look out my window at City Hall, you can see trains of cars going by. And now with GPS systems, it makes it easier to find these, quote, shortcuts. Well, what that does is creates traffic jam in Danbury. But if we don't set the lights to react to that, it really exacerbates the situation. So we're in the process of putting in that intelligent transportation system, and a little bit more time. We rolled it out on a temporary basis, and it was funny because we didn't anticipate getting 8,000 hits at once.
Wow,
right?
really? Wow.
So what happened is we ended up jamming up our server and everything, so we've had to go back and retool some of our technology piece of that.
So is there somebody sitting somewhere looking at these intersections?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's
Absolutely.
Interesting. Okay. Let's talk for a minute about public safety. Obviously, a recent concern is the anthrax situation.
And it's a serious situation. It's not, I don't want to minimize it, but I don't want to dismiss it either. So we're trying to strike that balance to say the city's taking this very seriously, but we don't want hysteria. And one of the things I think we did very well was communicate that to the residents, what was happening, why it was happening, and what we thought the outcome would be. Since the weekend, we've got the results back from the EPA. And those results say that the house itself had some contamination. Not a big surprise. We suspected, and a lot of the researchers that I've been talking to thought that they may find additional spores in the house. What does that really mean to the average person? Not a whole lot. However, we've got to take every step to protect the public good and the public health. Discussions are ongoing about, for example, this individual's wife was a teacher in the public school system. Does that mean she carried the spores in? The chief epidemiologist of the state of Connecticut says no. He says you don't need to go test the classrooms or anything like that. But we'll look at that closely and make sure we make the best decision for our children. So it's not something to dismiss, but it is serious. So I kind of again want to tell people that the big mobilization of forces that they saw, particularly from the federal side, the EPA and the FBI was involved early on, as well as later on the Department of Environmental Protection, the state one. It was warranted, and thankfully we're on top of it, and we feel very confident that we'll have it resolved. The big issue will be how do you remediate the house and the barn? And that is where the EPA has got a lot of work to do. And the other issue to that will be who's going to pay for it, because the city's not going to pay to remediate the private property. It obviously is going to be the insurance company of the landlord or the homeowner. So there's some work to be done there yet, but in terms of is there imminent threat or danger to anybody, absolutely not.
So it was really just, you know, the FBI coming in and following the protocol just to ensure that indeed everything's okay.
Right, and they actually handed it off to the EPA and DEP and said, look, this is your baby now, you have to work on this. And they have set protocols in place also, specific testing that they need to do. This is what's called naturally occurring anthrax. It's actually somewhat common in states like Texas where there's cattle. Cattle are raised and hides are taken off. It's not common for people to contract it. It is common to be in the hide, and so they take steps to dispose of that down there. Here in Connecticut, it's very rare. In fact, the U.S., there's only 1 or 2 cases throughout the United States that occur. So this naturally occurring anthrax can be dangerous if you inhale it. The fatality rate is about 50%. And if you get it on your skin, it's about an 80% rate of recovery. Without any treatment, it's 100% with antibiotics. So everybody's going to be okay, but we want to do our due diligence to make sure we're protecting the public good.
So we just had an unusual situation where we put ourselves on the map. One of those rare instances.
Yeah, I have to tell you, in 6 years, I've had to deal with it all. This is, and what I am very proud of is our city agencies, our health department, our first responders. Everybody really pulled together, and I'm very proud of the systems that we put in place that were able to respond in such a rapid fashion, and we're able to mobilize so easily.
So actually that brings up a good point. There's a new police headquarters. You want to speak to that?
We're working real hard on it. If you go past across from St. Joseph's Church on the corner of East Franklin and Main, we're about halfway through the site work as far as the remediation goes. There was some we always knew when we got into this that the property had some contamination. That continues to be the case, but we're in the process of remediating it. Nothing that's not uncommon you'll find at any site in the downtown at this point. Some mercury, things like that. And so we're about halfway through. We should be done in about 2 weeks with the remediation, and then we'll begin the actual digging of the foundation and the site work. And we'd like to get that in before the snow flies, and then in springtime we'll be able to do what we say. We're going to start going vertical on it, and we're excited about that. It's long overdue for our police officers. They've been working in absolute horrible conditions for the last 30 years. We know we need a police station that will plan for the future. This one does that. It's 70,000 square feet, and it will be a station that will last 75 years without any real major improvements, and there's always room to expand if that becomes the case in the community that long ago. We'll be gone, but somebody else's problem.
What's the target for that completion date, do you think?
It's 18 to 24 months. We would love to cut the ribbon in, July or August of 2009. And once we get out of the ground, it'll go pretty quickly. People will see it really come together, but about 18 to 24 months.
Okay. And then there's a new fire engine down at the other end?
Yeah, September 11th, tomorrow, as we're taping this, we'll be cutting the ribbon on the West Side Fire Station. We call it Engine 26. It's the first time we've added a new fire station in many, many years, and it actually was a project that was discussed by many past mayors, and I'm proud to say that I'm the mayor that got this off the ground and completed. Where we're going to swear in the new firefighters later that day, right for the new station, and at 5:30 on September 11th, that station goes online, and that will cut response times to the west side, which are critical. Right now, our typical response rate to a fire or some kind of incident on the west side is about 12 minutes. We will cut that down to a matter of 2 or 3 minutes.
Wow, that's great.
A little bit, between 2 and 4 minutes is probably accurate to be able to respond, depending on where it is on the west side of the city.
Now, how did you time that so perfectly for September 11th?
Actually, we were always shooting for around Labor Day, and then we just decided, well, isn't that a perfectly appropriate time to dedicate a new fire station? So we're really proud that we've been able to get that going. We're proud to help work on protecting the public safety for our residents, particularly on the west side of the city.
That's terrific. So what's happening with the neighborhood assistance program?
Well, we have the Office of Neighborhood Assistance, which is our outreach center. Rich Antos is our neighborhood coordinator. He's also the leader of what we call the unit, which is a Unified Neighborhood Inspection Team. And those two offices are there to do mediation about neighborhood disputes, to work on zoning issues, blight, litter, all different kinds of catch-all things, noise, that can disrupt the quality of life in the neighborhoods. And we have added staff there. We've added a police officer now at this time, so we're now writing tickets for parking on front lawns and for doing some of those kinds of illegal parking in the neighborhoods. And having the police officer there adds a different component to it, a much helpful component, because there's a lot of mediation skills that the officer has in terms of getting folks to really understand each other and to live in a cooperative spirit. And that's really what it's all about: promote harmony in their neighborhoods and promote a peaceful quality of life.
So people should be paying a little bit more attention to where they're parking. Is that?
I think I have to tell you, the two, if you said, Mayor, what are your pet peeves? Number one is litter.
Yeah.
And I'm concerned about it. We're going to continue working on that. We, for the first time, the unit can now issue citations and tickets, if you will, for litter on private property. Before, it was only on city property. So if you dropped a bag of garbage in the middle of the road, we can give you a ticket. Okay. Now we can give you a ticket anywhere. So if you got a front lawn that's filled up with litter, we're going to go out there and write you a $219
really?
ticket.
Isn't that interesting?
We're going to give you time to clean it first. Typically, Richie, or Mr. Antos will give 30 days or 2 weeks, depending on the severity. If it's a health risk, you got to clean it up immediately. But if it's just sort of stuff, we'll give you some time to get rid of it. But after that, we'll go out and we'll start ticketing you. And we find that really makes people move.
So even though it's on private property, like their own lawn,
right,
they've got to clean up.
They have to clean up. I mean,
okay.
if the public health, again, is potentially endangered, we're going to make you clean up your lawn. Now, what we like to think and what we like to do is to promote pride in our neighborhoods and our community. And we want, I want residents to feel good about Danbury, and I want them to not to want to litter, to understand that whether you've been here 40 years or you're one of our new Americans living in Danbury, you've really got to be conscious of how the streets look and picking up litter and cleaning. The other issue that we have, it's a silly one, but it'll drive people crazy, are the S&AT phone books, or I'm not sure who's driving now, but those books just they'll lay at the corner of somebody's house for months. And again, we're asking people, look, be a little more aware of your surroundings, pick up that kind of stuff, make the city look good. It helps your property values, it helps your quality of life as well. So litter is definitely a pet peeve. And the second part of that is parking on front lawns, and that again helps. It drives down the quality and degrades the quality of the neighborhood when a home is overpopulated, when there are too many people living there, when there's people parked all over the front lawn, and it really starts a downward spiral to neighborhoods. So that's a concern of ours too, and we're out there working hard and issuing tickets and trying to get people to just be a little more aware about how you're living and how that impacts the guy or gal next door to you.
So just the general look of the neighborhood is
critical.
Upgraded a little bit.
Right, and it's critical for the quality of life of the residents. That we have these great Clean City Danbury days in the spring. We'll get 1,500, 2,000 volunteers from all walks of life, all different ethnicities, which is the beauty of our community and our city. But we need to. Every day's got to be a Clean City Danbury Day. Everybody's got to be conscious about, I actually was I just was a couple weeks ago, was sitting in a light, and a lady literally, rolled down a window and just dropped a McDonald's bag full of stuff right in front of me. And I got out and I said, look, I'm not going to spaz on you or anything, but I've got to hire somebody to come pick that up. But more importantly, I said, why don't you have pride in our city? Why don't you think about what that means to do that? It's disrespectful to the hardworking men and women who clean the streets. But secondly, it just shows just a lack of care for our community. And I want you to think about that. And she felt bad and she picked it up and she said, I shouldn't have done it. But those kinds of interactions.
She's the mayor knocking on her door.
Right, you got to do it. But those kind of interactions have got to happen for people to recognize that it's we really need to work on that.
Yeah, you said so. Litter's a pet peeve of yours. Do you have others?
Parking on front lawns.
Parking on front lawns. Any others?
Generally, in terms of quality of life, those are probably the two biggest ones that we're battling right now. But of course, I don't want to sound negative about everything. I mean, those problems are rare, but people generally are fantastic, and they very much are willing to help out and to build a better city.
Curious about education. I mean, there's a lot happening. The Magnet School, the Roberts Avenue schools. Is there anything you want to speak to around those?
Well, at Roberts Avenue, we're in the process of building a new building there. We had a groundbreaking at the beginning of August. That's going well, and we're continuing to about an 18-month turnaround time again for that new school. The magnet school is open and operating this year, and we anticipate having a much stronger year financially than we did last year. We don't really see us having any problems in terms of funding it. We would like to expand the school to 6 through 8. I've talked to Dr. Pasquarella about that on a number of occasions. The board is definitely, we've all got consensus on that's what we want to do. And the reason is for a couple reasons. One, what we find is that particularly kids from surrounding communities, they may go back to an intermediate school. So they leave grade 5 from the magnet school, and they'll have to do 6 in another school, and then 7 and 8 at a middle school.
Yeah.
So we don't want to put kids into one school for just one grade. It just doesn't make sense. So what we'd rather do is keep them to 6, 7, and 8. We have the space to do it. We have the capacity to do it. We may have to tweak the building a little bit, and we're going to need a sign-off from the Department of Ed and from the State Board of Education. But that'll also help us in financing because we're going to keep those people in the system a little bit longer. Then at grade 8, you know, eventually, when we get there, whether I'm mayor or not over the next 20 years, once people hit grade 8, they'll be able to make a decision about what the school of their choice will be. Abitech is a very underrated school of choice in the community. It's a great school. Danbury High School may be a school of choice. Immaculate may be a school of choice. There may be other schools at that time that we have available to choose. And that's really where the vision is and where I think we need to go with education here in the region. And I think that's got to happen on a regional basis more than just on a Danbury-only basis, because the economies of scale are so difficult when you drive them down to individual cities and towns. But to share resources with other cities and towns, whether it be buildings, staff, programming, that really is the way to elevate the entire community in terms of outcomes for children. Once we start having higher expectations, once we start having better accountability, but once we also offer those schools of choice that drive kids down to smaller groups, more intensive, direct curriculum, one-on-one almost in many cases, we're going to see results that we want to see on things like NCLB and CAP tests and things like that.
So you would look to have the graduates after 8th grade.
Look at buildings that you may never thought you could put a school in there, because that'll drive down costs. What gets costly is when you have to have so many square foot per kid, and you have to have so many different stairwells, and you have to have such different facilities and things like that. The cost shoots through the roof, and it becomes, people look at it and go, I'm not going to add a new school, I'm not going to add a new program. One of the things I've been talking with the State Board of Ed about, and with the Commissioner of Education about, is let's look at some of the buildings differently than we did. Let's look at some of the old corporate centers. Let's look at some of the old buildings that we can change and that we can drive programming in there, so we can have a school of the fine arts where you'd still have English, you still have science, you still have math, all the important parts of your curriculum. But you might spend from 2 o'clock to 5 o'clock working on stagecraft or sound design or set design or acting or music. Let's have a school of the humanities where you'll work on English and social studies only in the afternoon. Let's look at blocks of curriculum where you'll spend 3 or 4 weeks only working on a particular social issue and learning everything there is to know about that social issue. I think those are the ways in which you can do it, and to do that you need flexible buildings.
So opportunities to really drill down in specialty areas.
Absolutely. That is how we're going to prepare our kids to really have the success they need to have in the 21st century. And it excites me, and that's, Danbury will do its own little piece to try and help that happen.
You know, Mr. Mayor, you've been mayor now for 6 years, and you mentioned your father was mayor in the late 70s. So clearly you love this city, that passion comes across, and you hope and anticipate to continue on. What would you like your greatest legacy, whether it's thinking about your achievements to date or things that you still anticipate, what would you like your greatest legacy when people think of you as the leader and mayor of this city to be?
Yeah, that's a really deep question. You know, it's going to turn out that, again, you know, whenever I leave, it'll turn out that I was the building mayor. When you think about how many police station, fire department, parking garage, new facilities, new athletic fields, I've accomplished a lot on that end. But I don't know if that's really what I want my legacy to be. I think that my legacy ought to be that when I came to the city, I found it in good shape, and I took it to a different level. And when I hand the baton off to somebody, they'll take it to the next level. And that's how we have good, steady government. You know, Danbury has been blessed with great leaders over the last 30 years who have had stability in office and have been able to accomplish much. When you look at communities that constantly turn leadership over, you'll see communities that are in states of flux, that financially are not strong, because each of us have, for the most part, carried our own legacy on. You know, I've carried Mayor Eriquez's initiatives early on in my administration. Somebody, when I leave, will carry on the things that I've started. And he carried on Mayor Dyer's and Mayor Sauer's before that. That's the beauty of our city, is that we've had such stable leadership over the years. So I like to be able to think that I made the city better than what it was. And, you know, frankly, look, I've never been afraid to tackle the difficult issues that face our community. It puts people out of their comfort zone sometimes, I recognize that. But one thing you'll say about me is if I think it needs to be addressed, I'll address it and try to do it in a compassionate and sensitive manner.
So you're not willing to back down on tough issues and
Absolutely not. And
get your hands dirty?
No, and if the voters have me back for another 2 years, you'll see that I'm going to continue to do those things. I'm going to lead the discussion on things like illegal immigration. I'm going to lead the discussion on educational excellence. I'm going to lead the discussion on open space acquisition and on better performing and better accountability out of our employees. I'm going to do all those things. And yes, sometimes those things will be uncomfortable, but we need to do that as a community so that we find ourselves and we find who we are and where we're going. And part of that job is for me to paint that vision. And so I think I've done that, and I think I'm doing that in this campaign cycle. And hopefully the voters will buy into it and say, you know, yeah, that's where we want to go.
So what would you say would be, you just listed a whole bunch of wonderful things that you would address. What would be sort of the top one if you had to pick one?
Well, you know, I'll be frank with you. I think that when we do, you know, our campaign does polling, our campaign does all those kinds of things. And when you talk about that, the number one issue out there for residents is illegal immigration in Danbury. It's not an issue in Bethel.
Yep.
It's not an issue in Newtown, but it is an issue in Danbury. Part of this discussion's got to be an education piece. Part of it's got to this discussion has to be done sensitively because people oftentimes use this as license to be, frankly, racist. And, you know, those people who are racist cannot sit at the table for this discussion. Conversely, there'll be people on the far left that'll say, well, there is no problem, you know, what are you talking about? And the fact that they won't recognize that there's a problem, I don't think they belong at the table either. But I'll tell you that 65 to 70% of the residents of the city think that there's an issue here, that there's a problem, that we have to address it, that, yes, we have to do it through putting pressure on our federal government, which I'm going to continue to do reform, and also to do enforcement. And I think there's a cynicism that it pervades amongst U.S. citizens that whatever Congress does about immigration won't matter because they won't enforce it anyways. And that's why enforcement is so important, to show that we're serious about the law. And so I think we're going to, you know, I know that we're going to continue to work on those things.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. You've really helped us better understand your position and the issues this evening. And
Thanks.
Thank you, audience, for joining us tonight.